Thank you, Charlie. That was a very interesting report. And now I want to get back to our first guest this evening, Clifford McKay Jr. Cliff, how did this small boat come into existence? How did it all get started?
Ken, it began when I got frustrated in building a soapbox derby racer. I went down the hill twice, and that was it. There were no more hills in Florida to roll a soapbox derby down. Dad got the idea. He said, suppose we take and call it an orange crate derby. Use all the principles of the soapbox derby with the merchant sponsoring the boat. The boy builds the boat, but instead of going down the hill twice, he can sail it 365 days out of the year. He went to the Optimist Club in Clearwater, made a speech there. I don't remember the details of it, but through some of their other youth programs, I was at the meeting. And he made a speech, put your hand on the head of a red-headed boy. And he suggested a number of projects, but among them was this orange crate derby with a small sailboat. The Optimist Club was very active at that point, and they took up the idea. They liked it. Dad went and talked with Clarkie Mills, a local boat builder and designer, and they put together this lovely little boat. It was in the fall of, I believe, '47 then that we got the first one completed. You got a picture of that historic day. Clarkie brought the boat and put it in the water and sailed it a minute to make sure I didn't drown, and then he turned it loose for me to sail.
What does this day bring back to you? What kind of memories?
Well, it was a little cool. The breeze was just right, and I remember the impression of this boat. I looked at it, and it looked sort of square and a bit bulky. And I wondered how it was going to sail, and I was impressed with how lovely it just stepped out. It was light and easy to handle, and just a delight to sail.
So you fell in love with the boat right away?
Oh, yes.
Do you think all the boys did when they...
Well, there were a number of guys that we had been sailing. We'd been hanging around the yacht club. Some of us had been sailing on snipes, and we really took to it. There were a gang of about 8 or 10 of us that started right away in sailing prams.
Who were some of these boys?
Well, Peter DeVoysen was one. I remember Peter and I were locking heads in the first international. I think we had boats from Dunedin and maybe St. Petersburg, the first international regatta. Peter's now a surgeon in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Monty Diamond was another one. Tink Berenice. Those are the names that come to mind right now.
You stayed in touch with any of them over the years?
Monty, unfortunately, was killed in an airplane crash with the Navy off of a carrier. I haven't had a lot of contact with the others. I've sort of kept touch with them, no, but not direct contact with them.
You know, one of the things that I heard about was a fire at one time.
A couple of years after the prams got started, they were kept in the old fish house, a tin building right there on the point outside the yacht club basin. And one night, Dad woke me up. He says, "Your boat's on fire." That's all I heard, and we rushed down there, tried to help put out the fire. Of course, it was gone. There was no possibility. Virtually the whole fleet was wiped out, some 25 boats. A couple of nights later, Howard Hartley, a local radio commentator, got on the radio, WTAN, and made an appeal. And of the 20-some-odd boats that were burned, they replaced 42 of them.
So actually the fire turned out to your benefit.
Well, in addition to the boats, they also collected funds and materials to rebuild the shed, and it's now, the existing concrete block building there was built by some of those funds that was raised. It turned out to the benefit in terms of number of boats. It also was untold publicity and the community support. It was really exciting.
Well, that's an instance where a disaster turns into something good, which is something that doesn't happen often. But looking back over the years, what did sailing those first prams mean to you as an individual, as a person?
Well, it meant many delightful hours on the water. It was a boat I could launch myself. I could take it out of the shed, put it in the water, go out sailing, and any number of afternoons after school I was out on the bay sailing. I know all the mangrove islands, which is now island estates. Knew them very intimately as I sailed in and around of them, and we were always racing one another. You know, whenever two sailboats together, they're racing.
What was the average number of boats in a race?
Well, in the early days, there were probably 10, 12, somewhere around that, but very quickly it grew. one of the exciting things was going around to the Florida Sailing Association regattas, which they had all up and down the west coast of Florida, Sarasota, Bradenton, Boca Ciega Bay, off Gulfport, Paso Grill, Tampa, and Clearwater, Dunedin. We would take the boats. Ernie Green really pitched in from the Optimist Club and became sort of the daddy of the fleet. Ernie was in the moving business, and he had this monstrous green moving van. Now picture this. The sailors were gathered for the race. They parked in a field that somebody had agreed to let them use. They were putting their trailers down. In this situation, here comes a green moving van. And you open up the back end of it, and they start pulling out these little boats. The sailors didn't know quite what to make of these little ones. My uncle was at one of the races at Paso Grill, and I had trouble with the line that held my sail to the mast, and I sailed along his boat, alongside his boat, in order to fix it and adjust it. And he was putting me down. He says, "Here, you want to borrow my shoestring to tie that back up with?" That was sort of what they thought of it. And then when the moving van pulled up and disgorged 20 or 30 boats, things really got exciting. But they took to it and recognized the value of it as a training boat for other sailing.
So this idea spread very quickly in terms of other communities picking up on Pram fleets and starting to build their own boats. And did it go down the west coast of Florida?
It went all up down the west coast, went over to Miami and up the east coast as well. I've forgotten the exact time frame. It was something like 5 or 6 years, and there were over 1,000 boats in Florida alone.
Well, what about inside the United States?
It didn't spread quite as quickly all over the United States, but once it got a foothold in Florida, it wasn't too long before it became and is now recognized as an international class.
You used the word international right from the beginning. Whose idea was that?
Well, I think this was, it was Optimist International, so it had that capability. But they were thinking big. They were thinking big, and the first major regatta was an international regatta.
And where was that?
Right off Clearwater Point, right there, right there by the drawbridge, off the old pier that was there right beside the drawbridge.
How many boats you think were in that
There were about 30 boats in that one. I remember particularly that race. It was a 6-race series, which was a little unusual. We finished 5 races, and Peter and I were tied. So whoever beat the other one in the last race was going to win it. And I had a little trouble with my sail. It sounds like I always had trouble with my sail coming untied. That wasn't entirely true, but in that one I did. Again, I got it tied together. Didn't have quite as much time as I wanted to plan the start, but got off to a good start, and we would just nip and tuck all the way around the course. We came down the last leg, and I goofed. I let him get upwind of me, and he stole my wind, which is perfectly legal in sailing races, of course. And he got that last little puff that I think he beat me by about half a boat length.
Well, I certainly want to thank you for being with us this evening and sharing some of these thoughts about the Pram. And we'll be going to our second guest shortly. Thank you.